My name is Mathew Asgari, UX designer for Wired magazine. My presentation is called From 30,000 Feet. Wait. This is a journey from being a graffiti artist to UX designer. As we know, UX design is based on data-driven design decisions to create an experience on a multitude of platforms that gives the user the most optimal and immersive experience. I'm going to share a personal journey from painting walls to painting pixels, how graffiti developed a foundation for design that would eventually lead me and direct me towards user experience design. I started in New Jersey, a place known for its industrial landscapes and its beautiful views of the Big Apple. New York. I had one of the greatest cities at my fingertips, full of culture and subcultures alike, a city that would cater to any vice and capture the soul of anyone that stepped foot into it. I was a young kid in the middle of what seemed to be the future. As a youth, I rode the 7 train in Queens, New York, to watch the New York Mets play baseball. And this is where my journey began. These trains were plastered with graffiti, end to end, some of it good, a lot of it just layers of signatures that almost seemed to make up what seemed to be a wallpaper. The average commuter must have looked at these walls and thought, how disgusting. It was unavoidable in the 1980s that the city had an unfocused energy. I was fascinated as to why the environment appeared to be this way. All I could think about was why, how, and where do I sign up? I began researching and stumbled upon wild style and subway art, books and movies that surrounded the subculture of graffiti throughout New York and beyond. As insignificant as these documentations of graffiti were back in the 1980s, they played a major role in capturing the movement in its infancy. A collection of visual data later to be shared and collected as sort of a subculture artifact. Simultaneously, I would take up skateboarding, which would direct me and align me with the music I listened to. And these graphics that were displayed on these boards would drive me to create graphics as well as mimicking these brands that were targeting to their respective audiences. These graphics were as wild as my imagination, and I embraced their spirit. These subcultures were defined as if they were carved out of stone. They had an energy like the music I listened to, like Black Sabbath, Metallica, Bad Brains, Black Flag, and more. I was hooked. I grabbed a spray can and my skateboard and lost myself in the streets of New York. Some of my earlier basic attempts at graffiti were unsuccessful in my opinion, as you can see above. But the foundation for structure within each style was forming. I took feedback from various sources and began to adjust my designs. It was the beginning of what would later become a major passion in my life, introducing me to an abstract form of typographic design, balancing structure with spatial awareness, as well as color and the environment. We would scour catalogs of paint, sourcing colors that we couldn't find anywhere. I mean, we worked with what we had. We didn't stop at graffiti. To have a complete understanding of what you're doing, you have to completely immerse yourself in what makes up a culture to produce material that that culture itself will respect. We would go to shows at the infamous CBGBs, sometimes getting into a bit more than we can handle, but nonetheless developing more perspective on these subcultures. Skateboarding in New York was our main form of transportation. It kept us close to the street, a place full of subculture, a driving force in my creativity, still to this day. It's an honest place, but if you don't treat it right and you don't respect it, it will chew you up and spit you out. At this point, my artistic endeavors seemed to lean towards graphical work as I was producing cleaner and cleaner work on the streets doing graffiti. This would eventually lead me to study communications design at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I took what I knew, taught myself about design and color theory and spatial awareness within graffiti, and began the process of communicating through the digital platform. But at that point, I was back to square one, a single pixel. Learning how to see things differently than I had taught myself, yet staying true to the subcultures that I adored. I brought in my knowledge of design as a whole, strengthening my foundation and adding layers to what already existed. Bringing my efforts to a more focused place, back down to square one again. With a newfound and rounded approach, I was able to differentiate good design through calculated ideas and execution, something I had thought I had known, but not really. And seeing where I needed to improve and how I could use that with digital design as well as graffiti art. It was at this point that I encountered a crossroad between graffiti and digital design, from painting exterior surfaces to painting and organizing pixels in a way to communicate a visual language on a multitude of platforms. I designed magazine ads, some of my first works. Skateboard designs and apparel, something that I knew and was all too familiar with from my youth. But I knew the people that needed it. I knew what it meant to design and what to do with it, how people wore it, how people wrote it, and keeping it still with its integrity. In doing so, I developed my graffiti even further. At this point, I began acquiring commissions, as well as collaborations with brands. They began to trust me because of the focus I took towards both graffiti and design. As you can see, there's more work here. I began to get better, cleaner, taking more graphical approach to what I was doing. This helped me adjust and make more intuitive decisions, also improving my direction as a whole, both digitally and on the street. I did projects with Ray-Ban. People began contacting me regarding these projects. They saw my work. They saw the focus I took in both platforms and were intrigued that I can execute both. I think it was at that point that I started to realize that having both digital and creativity and artistic hand and doing things by hand and digitally created a more dynamic approach that people liked. I can create a product from beginning to end. It wasn't just handing off a file. I did projects with Heineken, one-off painting jobs. These things were only possible because I had a background in art and painting. I didn't just go direct to computer. And I believe that it created a better foundation, a more well-rounded approach, something that at times lacks in the digital world. Based on the fact that I was able to translate my art into a fully designed product on any medium I can dream up, in doing so, metrics were involved in this work. Not metrics I was aware of, but these brands were. They needed to know how these projects were performing, how my art was touching people and how those people were reacting. In turn, how they were going to monetize, how they were getting their money back, how the return was, what it was. Some of these projects were new, first-time projects for these companies to do collaborations with an artist, and it was risky for them. They needed to know whether they should continue pursuing these projects based on this data. I was curious to know how my designs were affecting the market. Generally, as an artist, you're not subjected to this. It's just based on whether you were successful or not. They'll cut you out of the picture or they'll hire someone else. I became more involved in the process. I wanted to know what the back end of it was, not just creating the piece and letting it go and moving on to the next, but really getting an understanding for how I was affecting people and how I was affecting brands. And based on the graphical standpoint that I took, it was only going to help me become better. I took on a number of visualization projects at that point. Now that I immersed myself in art, design, I wanted to know more about what these designs were doing. This became very important to me. It helped me shape myself in a way that I can create and deliver better product based on numbers and not just aim in the dark into what pleased me, but what people needed and how I can design around that. I could then present an opinion based on fact. And when I presented an idea, there were numbers behind it. There was ideas, there were previous projects, there was a history. And there was a history for myself as an artist on the street, an artist digitally. And again, it helped fortify a bond between myself and brands. It created a desire to work with myself, but also for me to work with these companies that were more knowledgeable and accepting of who I was as an artist. In turn, more data visualization projects ensued as I started getting deeper into the world. I started doing projects that solely dealt with data, like mayoral campaign infographics. And this one was in New York, really to show more about what these numbers were doing for people on the street level, somewhere where I was really familiar with. Also doing data visualization about how data can change decisions turning into designs, and designs returning back more money for companies, being smarter and more intuitive about what we were doing. With this experience, I eventually landed a position at Condé Nast, at the editorial development group, a design team led by Billy Sorrentino, the current executive creative director at Wired magazine. This was a new experience for me. It was where I was fully immersed in solely UX design, yet I still had my background. It was here I became part of a large team of talented designers and developers. We worked on a multitude of projects, but more importantly was the Condé Nast video portal. It was the first of its kind. We developed a whole new site for every brand of the company, from all 18 brands. It was a place where video became more important and more important. Over the years, they needed a place to put it. And video nowadays, of course, we know, is a lot more ads. This was extremely important. It was a great launch, and we worked further and further on developing more product around this. Eventually, this led to developing the newsstand for the iOS 7 release. We worked with a number of departments on this. There was a lot of factors that came into play. Icon work, selling ads, developing an experience that was as visually appealing as it was functional. This is when I had the opportunity to take a position as UX designer at Wired magazine. I had to jump on it. It was amazing. It was under the direction of Scott Dadich, our editor-in-chief, and Billy Sorrentino, now the new creative executive director. It's been quite the journey. The Wired redesign launched this year. And being part of the entire team of talented designers and developers at Wired has been an absolute dream. I'm not exactly sure how it all happened, but I believe it all started with being diverse. In turn, creating fully responsive sites that cater to many platforms and different kinds of users. In this, I'm fully grateful to be able to wake up every morning and be able to dream in the most creative of ways in an environment that embraces creativity. Thank you.